Okay, I'm going to get started this morning by welcoming all of you guys. Sawadee Kap, Sawadee Kap. Welcome to everyone. Welcome to everyone online as well. This is our group learning program where each Sunday and Wednesday I get together with students and helping them understand the teachings from the Buddha that help you move to enlightenment, where the mind can be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy permanently. You no longer experience any discontent feelings. So what we do to get started is we start with meditation. So I'll guide you guys in a meditation session, and then afterwards, I'm going to share some teachings with you that will help you to understand the life story of the Buddha and what motivated him to get to enlightenment. This is chapter 19 of our book, which we use for this program. It's a book titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. And you can get this for free by downloading it. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions here at the temple by just reimbursing us for the printing cost, or you can get it on Amazon if you have access to Amazon in your country. So we use this book as part of a 7-month program where I gradually walk you through chapter by chapter each Sunday to be able to help you understand the foundational teachings to develop your life practice for the attainment of enlightenment. So if you'd like to join for meditation, the way that we start is I ease into meditation with some chanting. And if you'd like to see these chants and even chant along, they're on the table over there. There's a laminated sheet. I see a lot of you guys already have them, actually. For those of you guys online, if you'd like to get access to this, you can go to our website, buddhadailywisdom.com. And from there, you'll click on free books. And towards the bottom, you'll see the chanting sheet there. These chants are something that we do nowadays in order to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. During the lifetime of the Buddha, chanting was used as a way to commit the teachings to memory, that every 2 weeks his students would come together and recite his teachings orally. Because everything was oral during his lifetime, they didn't write things down. So these chants, there's nothing mystical or magical. It's not a prayer or worship. It's not a rite or ritual or a ceremony or anything like this. And if you read the English translations, you're going to see a lot of admiration and respect and gratitude for the Buddha. I suspect that the Buddha didn't even create these chants. They were probably created by his students either during his life or after his death, because a Buddha wouldn't go around and teach people to chant these things to him, because he would have eliminated his ego. He wouldn't have this arrogance and pride and putting himself above other people. So these chants, there's nothing mystical or magical. You shouldn't take it as a prayer or worship or anything like that. It just helps you to ease into the meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation by cultivating some awareness of mind and awareness of breath as you're easing into the meditation. Once we get into the meditation, you're going to hear me providing you some guidance as we go, and I'll just do that for a period of time just to help you get started. Then there's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet. We're just all meditating together. Those of us here at the temple and everyone online will just be meditating, and you won't be able to experience complete quietness, right? This is oftentimes the mind's craving that during a meditation. So you're going to hear occasional things where you might hear a dog barking, a bird chirping, you might hear a car going by or something like this. This is all normal and it's just impermanent. So as you hear those things, you can just bring your mind back to the breath and focusing on the breath. And as you're developing your meditation practice, you might be interested in some guidance on body position. So I'll give you some of that before we get into the meditation itself. There's 4 positions that you can use, which are seated, lying, standing, and walking. And I teach these in the different courses and retreats and programs that I share, but oftentimes students are starting off in the seated position. So if you're in the seated position on the floor, which a lot of people sit on the floor, but it's not about everybody sitting the exact same way, so there's other options as well, you might just sit with your legs lightly crossed. Sometimes people might have those real tight and it has pain in the body. You're not interested in that. So if you just have your legs lightly crossed, this would be helpful for you. Some people like to put their legs off the mat. This gets your hips up in the air and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles. So if you like to do that, that's an option for you as well. And then your hands and your arms. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. If this is comfortable for you, you could use it. But this practice isn't about everyone doing it exactly the same way. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or their knees, their palms up. You might even decide to just rest your hands comfortably in your lap. All of these and others are options, so feel free to do whatever you're comfortable with. This is just a little bit of light guidance to be able to help you a bit. And for those of you guys that are in chairs, or maybe you're on a sofa or a bench or in a wheelchair at home, you might just sit with your feet on the floor. Some people like to just put their feet flat on the floor. Some people lightly cross them at the ankles. It's really whatever is comfortable for you. And the same thing with the hands and the arms. You could just put them wherever you're comfortable. The upper body should be erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation, whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. But if you are real rigid with the upper body, the mind could be overactive or uptight. So you'd like the upper body to be in the middle with the sternum up and the shoulders back. This will keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation, and it'll also help you to easily breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. So again, I'm going to start with chanting, and if you guys would like to join along, you're more than welcome to, and then I'm going to come in with some guidance for the meditation itself. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakava Bhutang Mahakavanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vichacharanang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Bhoto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, in the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath, not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเกวาพุทธังมหาเกวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเกวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาดัมมาสติสัตตาตาวาปมานุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to everyone. Welcome to all of you guys that are here at the temple. Welcome to everyone joining us online. Welcome to everyone who's joined us since we started meditating. Welcome to everyone. Nice to see you guys here today. Today's topic is from our book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. It's chapter 19. It's titled The Difficult Human Existence, Sickness, Aging, and Death. And this is where you learn a bit about the life story of the Buddha and what motivated him on this journey to enlightenment. And also you understand more about sickness, aging, and death, because these are three problematic times in the human existence that oftentimes when you're experiencing sickness, aging, or death, or the people around you are experiencing sickness, aging, and death, you might be having a lot of difficulties with that. And the teachings of the Buddha are going to help you to overcome those challenges and those difficulties if you understand them and you train your mind to eliminate the causes and conditions that are producing the discontentedness. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the life story of the Buddha with you using this outline of his birth, his early life, his journey to enlightenment, and then his teaching career. And then we're going to ultimately talk about sickness, aging, and death as well. As we go in today's class, you guys are welcome to ask any and all questions that you like. We have microphones here for those of you at the temple. If you could just get a microphone, press the gray button, and then you'll see the lights that'll turn on. You just wait a second or two, and you hold it up to your chin, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online as well. If you were talking without a microphone, they wouldn't be able to hear you online. And when you get these microphones, you're welcome to take it back to your seat, because you might have more than one question, or the people around you might have a question. So you're welcome to use the microphones and keep them with you if you like. And then for those of you guys online, if you would like to ask questions, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, and I'll be able to see that and then answer any question that you might have. And then for those of you guys in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand asking any questions you like by just unmuting your microphone, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you through the live stream as well. So the life story of the Buddha starts out with him being born into a royal family. His wife, or his mom, was a queen, and his dad was a king. And he lived in a region of the world that we refer to as Nepal. It wasn't referred to that way during his lifetime, but now there's that line between Nepal and India. But at one time, these were just different kingdoms that were spread out throughout the land. And the way that the culture worked during that time frame is that if you were a woman and you were pregnant and you were making your way and you were getting ready to have birth, you would make your way back to your homeland, to wherever you grew up, and that's where you would give birth. And giving birth there, you would have your family to be able to help you. So as the queen was getting close to delivery, they organized a caravan to take her back to her homeland. And she was making her way back to her homeland, and she goes into labor. And when she goes into labor, they stop the caravan, and she gets out and she goes over to this tree, and she holds on to this branch of the tree. She's trying to deliver the baby by standing up so it can come out through the birthing canal. But the baby couldn't fit through the birthing canal, so it ends up breaking through the side of her stomach. And because of this, she ends up dying 7 days later, where nowadays we would have just done a C-section, no problem, she would have been just fine. But 2,500 years ago, when Siddhartha Gotama was born in 563 BC, they didn't have this technology to be able to help a woman who was having difficulties with childbirth. So the baby breaking through the side of her stomach, she ends up dying 7 days later. And because death by the mother and or the child wasn't uncommon during this period of time, they actually had protocols in place that if the mother died during delivery or at any time after childbirth, that if you had siblings, they would adopt your children as their own. So Siddhartha Gautama's mother had an older sister who ended up adopting Siddhartha Gautama as her own child. So essentially his aunt became his stepmother. And now he grew up in the palace. But at the time of his birth, his dad was interested in understanding what his son was going to become. This was another practice that was going on during this time frame, that his father, the king, summoned advisors to come and let him know what his father was going, or what his son was going to become. And these advisors, 108 of them came to advise his father, and 107 of them ended up sharing with the father that his son was going to be a great monarch and a great ruler, and was going to rule over his land and expand his territory and these kinds of things. And of course, his father liked that, and he was like, yeah, that's my boy. All right. This is going to be great. My son's going to expand my territory. But there was this one advisor, the very last advisor, that came in and said, sir, I'm so sorry. I apologize. I heard what the other advisors shared with you, that your son was going to be this great leader and this great monarch. And they're actually true. That's true, that your son is going to be a great leader, but not in the way that you think. Your son is going to be a great spiritual leader. And his father didn't like this. So his father ends up deciding to sequester his son in the palace, keeping him in the palace and not letting him go outside, because he felt that if he could get his son used to living this life as a ruler and as a monarch, as a prince, being lavished with all kinds of things, that he would never be able to get that lifestyle any other place, and he would never be interested in leaving to do anything other than be the king. So his father lavishes him with all these gifts, wonderful fabrics to wear on his body, lots of entertainment, various foods and things like this, beautiful women bathing him and taking care of him, all the royal riches that you can imagine that a king would be able to bestow upon their son. He was able to do this. So Siddhartha Gautama is inside the palace for the first 29 years of his life, basically enjoying this lavish lifestyle that his father is creating for him. But he knows that he's about to become the king, because at the age of 30, he was going to become the king. This is the way that things happened during that time frame, is that you didn't wait until your dad died before you became the king. You became the king at the age of 30, and your dad would essentially retire and live alongside of you and kind of help you to become a better and better king. So Siddhartha Gautama, realizing that at the age of 29, he was about to become the king, he decides to go outside the palace and see what life in the kingdom was all about, because he was about to rule over these people and this population of people, but he had never even been outside the palace to see what the kingdom was like. So without his father knowing, he goes outside the palace and he takes with him his royal attendant, or his chief of staff, his main confidant. And he goes outside the palace and he sees what we refer to as the 4 observations. And these are the things that motivated him to go off on his journey to experience enlightenment, where he trained his mind to get to this enlightened mental state. He sees a sickly person, an aging person, he sees a dead corpse, and he sees a roaming ascetic, somebody who's looking to be able to get to enlightenment and train their mind and understand the world better. And when he sees these things, he doesn't understand what they are, so he needs to ask his royal attendant what's going on. When he sees the sickly person, he sees this disgruntledness and this frustration around this person, the person themselves and the family members, and he has to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there? Why is this occurring? And the royal attendant's like, oh, this person is sick. They're not going to be able to work. They're not going to be able to get food and their basic necessities to sustain life. And this is why they're so disgruntled. And this was really different for Siddhartha Gautama, because he had never experienced that. He had everything that he ever needed in the royal palace. He didn't experience this situation where he didn't have what he wanted. So then this has a real impact on him, seeing this situation. Then he sees an aging person, essentially someone who's getting older and decrepit, having difficulties walking and things like this. And he has to ask his royal attendant again, like, what's going on over there? What's happening with this person? Because there was disgruntledness and frustration around this person too. And he's like, oh, this person's getting old and they're not going to be able to work, and they're going to have struggles to acquire food and the things that they need to survive. And Siddhartha Gautama has a real impact from this too. It really is impactful to him, because he didn't understand this, that he didn't understand that, people could struggle like this, because he was living this life of luxury. Then he sees the dead corpse, and same thing, he sees this sorrow and this grief and this despair around the dead corpse. And he needs to ask his royal attendant, what's going on over there? And again, he has to explain to him that this family member has died and there's going to be less help in the household. There's not going to be as many people being able to help them to be able to sustain their life. And now the people are grieving and sorrowful because this person's passed away. And this has another real impact on Siddhartha Gautama. But finally, he sees the 4th observation. This individual who's given up worldly possessions and has gone off on this journey to understand life and to understand the world. And when he sees this, he needs to ask his royal attendant, like, what's that? What's that person doing over there? He's like, oh, that person's trying to understand life, and they're trying to understand all this sickness, aging, and death. And Siddhartha Gautama realizes that this is what he would like to do. That the way that he saw it was that the kingdom was full of misery and despair, and he wasn't interested in ruling over that. He was interested in helping people to escape that. So he decides that he's going to leave the royal palace and go on this journey to be able to figure out life and how to solve this sickness, aging, and death. So when he goes back to the royal palace, he has a wife at this time, and he has a young infant child. And he didn't understand the mind the way that he did by ultimately the time he got to enlightenment, but he understood enough that he felt like if he woke up his child and he woke up his wife because they were sleeping, that he wouldn't be able to leave the palace, because he would be kind of be holding on to them too tightly. So he doesn't even wake them up. He just kind of looks in on them, and then he kind of leaves out of the royal palace, taking with him his favorite horse and his royal attendant. This is what he takes with him when he leaves the palace. And when he leaves, taking his horse and his royal attendant, he ultimately gets to a point where he decides to ask them to leave, that they've done a good job, to his royal attendant. He doesn't need them anymore. He can go back to the royal palace. He lets his horse go, and he ends up cutting off his hair. At this time, if you were part of the royal family, you would grow your hair very long. And this is how people knew that you were part of the royal family. Where today, we just put the pictures of the royalty all over the kingdom, and then people know who the royal family is. But during that time frame, the technology to put photographs around the kingdom didn't exist. So the way that they would know that someone was a member of the royal family is that you would grow your hair very long, even the males. And it was only the royal family that would be able to take care of this hair, because the common person would be out in the fields working and doing laborious jobs, and our hair would get all tangled up and knotted. But for the royal family, they could have their hair combed and brushed and shampooed and detangled, because they had the time to sit around to do that, and they had servants to be able to take care of those kinds of things. So Siddhartha Gautama cutting off his hair was like, I'm never going back. Because if he's been growing this hair for 29 years, there'd be no way that anybody in the kingdom would ever think that he was the king, having not had this long flowing hair that everybody was accustomed to, that the royal family would have. There's other things that he benefited from by cutting off his hair, but this is one of the things that he was doing when he was shedding these things that he needed to shed, was by cutting off his hair. It was like, I'm never going back to the royal palace. He's going to figure out how to train his mind and get to enlightenment. So because he didn't really know much at that time, he was just starting out, he ends up taking up training with two different teachers. The first teacher he ends up taking up training with teaches him all these things that disparage the human body, causing pain to the physical body. Because these teachers were claiming that they had figured out what it took to get to enlightenment. And they were teaching you that if you cause physical pain to the body and your mind could overcome that, that you would be able to get to enlightenment. So Siddhartha Gautama follows along with these teachings for about 1 year. He learns to hang himself upside down from trees, lay on beds of nails, pierce his body with metal implements, starve the body where he's not eating much food at all. And again, they were trying to overcome this physical pain. And after about 1 year, the teacher had shared with Siddhartha Gautama that he had mastered his teachings, and that now he declared him to be a master of this teachings, that he could share his teachings. And Siddhartha Gautama realized that his mind wasn't any more peaceful than it was when he was in the palace. So he knew that he hadn't gotten to enlightenment, and whatever he had learned from this teacher hadn't led to enlightenment, because he mastered his teachings, but yet his mind wasn't enlightened. So he ends up going to find a second teacher, and now he studies with this teacher for about a year. And the same thing occurs. He essentially teaches him the same exact things to disparage the physical body. And once again, at the end of the year, this teacher says, you've mastered my teachings, you can share these teachings. And Siddhartha Gautama realizes his mind isn't any more peaceful than it was when he was in the royal palace. So he's frustrated with this whole situation, and he decides to go off on his own out into the forest, and he starts to try to train his own mind. But the only things that he knows at this time is the same things that he was taught by these two teachers. So he continues to starve himself and do these disparaging things. He takes it so far that he's only eating 1 grain of rice per day, and he gets to the point where his body is about to die, that his bones are protruding, his ribs are showing, his meat is deteriorating, the flesh is deteriorating from the body, his facial bones are protruding, and he's about to die. And he's sitting in meditation, and he's in the forest and kind of on the edge of the forest, and this mother and this young daughter come by, and they see in the condition that he's in, and they bring him some rice, and they plead and beg with him to please eat this rice. And he reluctantly accepts this rice and starts eating it. And in this moment, he has a realization. He has a certain wisdom that he cultivates at that moment, that he realizes that when he was in the royal palace, he was doing all these sensual pleasures. He was practicing, where he was indulging in all these entertainment, wonderful food, beautiful fabrics, and all these other things. But then when he left, his mind kind of swung all the way to the other side, where now he was disparaging the body, and he was doing all these disparaging things to the body. And he discovered when he started eating that rice that there's this middle way, that he could eat in moderation, because if he allowed the physical body to die, he wouldn't be able to train the mind. So he starts to eat in moderation, and he starts to discover what we refer to as the middle way, where you don't live on one side or the other, but you bring the mind to the middle, where you can gradually work towards certain things. So he starts to eat in moderation. He eats 1 full meal a day. And then gradually, slowly but surely, over a 4-year period, total of 6 years, he ends up getting to enlightenment. And he knows that he attained enlightenment because his mind's peaceful, it's calm, it's serene, it's content with joy. He no longer experiences any discontent feelings. There's no anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All these feelings and others are completely eliminated from the mind. So he knows that he's attained this mental state. But he wasn't sure that the world was ready to understand the teachings that he had discovered. So he ends up going to this tree, and he ends up staying there for about 7 weeks. And he's sitting at this tree contemplating, doing meditation and things like this. And he decides at the end of 7 weeks that, yes, he's going to share his teachings because he felt like this was a worthwhile pursuit. Rather than go back to the royal palace and live this life of luxury, he decides to start sharing his teachings. So he makes his way back towards the area where he was originally studying with those first 2 teachers. And he encounters 4 of his previous classmates and 1 of his previous teachers. And these 5 people see him coming, and they see he has meat on his bones and his body looks healthy and vibrant. And they started laughing at him and joking him and mocking him because they thought he had given up on the journey to enlightenment. Because to them, to get to enlightenment, you needed to be starving the body. And the fact that he had meat on his bones and he was looking healthy, it was like, he must have given up. He must have went back to the royal palace. So they started laughing and joking him and mocking him. But by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind's not going to be affected by that. If somebody's saying something negative or degrading or disparaging about this being who you are, you're not going to be upset. You're not going to be frustrated. So Siddhartha Gotama just walks over to where they're at. He sits down and he takes his hand and he touches the earth, performing the one and only miracle that he performed during his lifetime. This miracle was that when he touched the earth, these animals came to where he was at. So there was deer and squirrels and birds and rabbits and different animals that came to where he was at. And these 5 people, seeing what he had done, they were like, okay, you've got our attention. And they sat down, and Siddhartha Gotama, the Buddha now, decides to deliver his very first teaching, which is called the Four Noble Truths. This is the very first teaching that you need to learn in order to get on to the path to enlightenment. Because in 4 simple statements, you learn what is the problem in your mind, what is the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And the way that the teachings of a Buddha work is that they're independently verifiable. They're not based on belief. It's not believing a bunch of things and then hoping something good happens when you die. Instead, you learn teachings, you examine them and investigate them, then you reflect on them to independently verify whether they're true or they're false, and then you start practicing the teachings. You integrate them into your life and you're training your mind and you're cultivating wisdom. So the Buddha explained these 4 noble truths, which is your mind experiences discontentedness, which are conditioned feelings, where your mind is forming your inner feelings based on some condition. So for example, if it's sunny outside, you might get happy or excited or elated. These are pleasant feelings. But then if you allow your mind to do that, when that condition changes, where it's no longer sunny outside, where now it's raining, you might be sad or frustrated or angry. This is the painful feelings. This is the problem that the unenlightened mind experiences, that it's experiencing these conditioned feelings where the mind's going up and down and up and down. The mind is basing its inner feelings on some condition. And because everything around you is impermanent, as soon as you base your feelings on some condition, like the sun, or maybe your bank account, you get happy when your bank account's at a certain balance. And then when it goes down, maybe you're sad or you're frustrated because that balance is not permanent. Or if your parents do this, if your mom and dad does this thing, you're maybe happy. But if they do this thing, you're maybe sad or frustrated. Essentially, what's causing this discontentedness is the mind is craving. It's having desire. It's having longing and yearning. The mind's wanting things to be a certain way. And if the unenlightened mind gets what it wants, then it experiences conditional pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, euphoria, things like this. But then when the mind doesn't get what it wants, it gets the painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, the boredom, the loneliness, the shyness, resentment, jealousy, the fear, the guilt, the shame, things like this. And then there's neither painful nor pleasant feelings as well. So as long as the mind is having these cravings, the desires, the attachment, the longing, the yearning, wanting things to be a certain way, when you get what you want, you get happy. And when you don't get what you want, you get painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. And this is the cause of discontentedness, the craving, the desire, the longing, the yearning, wanting or expecting things to be a certain way. And you can independently verify this. You can look at your own life and see that in situations where you were angry or sad or frustrated, there was something you wanted. There was something you expected. There was something you longed and yearned for. And if you got it, you would have been happy. But since you didn't get what you wanted, the mind got angry or frustrated. Because in the unenlightened state, we will typically blame our feelings on other people. You might think that other people are causing you to be angry, or other people are causing you to be sad or frustrated or annoyed. But in reality, it's the mind itself that's causing these feelings. And this is so important to understand as you're having this breakthrough, to understand the first teaching of the Buddha is that your mind is causing these discontent feelings through craving, desire, attachment. Because when you understand that it's your mind that's causing these feelings, then you understand the third noble truth, which is your mind can actually eliminate these discontent feelings. Because if it's everyone else that's causing these feelings in your mind, then you wouldn't ever be able to solve them. You might be out in the world with the misunderstanding that other people are causing you to be angry or sad or frustrated. So when you experience those painful feelings, you might be pushing people away or pushing a situation away. This is called aversion, where the mind, with its lack of wisdom, is thinking this solves the problem. But it doesn't solve the problem, because it's only a matter of time before you get angry or frustrated or sad about something else. If this was the real cause of the problem, this person, when you push them out of your life, you would be peaceful and you would be joyful from that point forward. But when you push people out of your life, you're not peaceful, because it's only a matter of time before you become annoyed or frustrated or agitated about something else, because the mind is craving permanence. It wants things to be a certain way permanently. The other thing you'll do when you lack wisdom about these Four Noble Truths is you might be bitter and harsh and hostile towards people. This is like an animal growling and roaring and showing its teeth, trying to fear this other being into doing things your way. Because the unenlightened mind thinks if I can just get things my way, then everything will be perfect. So you might be trying to fear other people through your harshness and your bitterness or your hostility. Or you might put your expectations on people and try to control them and get them to do things your way. And this is another part of the lack of wisdom of the mind, that it just doesn't understand that you can't train 8 billion people in the world to do things your way. It's just not possible. So as long as you misunderstand what's causing these feelings, and you're thinking it's something external, you might keep pushing people away or pushing a situation away, being bitter, harsh, and hostile towards people, or putting your expectations on people. So when you understand that the cause of these discontent feelings are within your own mind, then you can understand the third noble truth, which is the way to eliminate these feelings is to train your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. Because craving, desire, attachment, this longing, yearning, this is the cause of the problem. So if you eliminate the cause, then you will eliminate the problem. You will eliminate the discontentedness. So the fourth noble truth, the Buddha gives you the complete perfect plan of how to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, which is called the Eightfold Path. This is the core central teaching that you learn on the path to enlightenment in order to actively train your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. And as you're practicing the Eightfold Path, you're dialing this in closer and closer to your life, you will experience the peace and the joy coming in more and more. You'll see that the mind has focus, concentration, and clarity and deep memory. Your personal, professional relationships will blossom. You won't be bitter and harsh and hostile in your relationships any longer. And you'll notice that your relationships really blossom. You won't even be in a bad mood anymore. It'll be impossible for you to experience any of these things because you've removed the causes and conditions that are are producing it. But as long as you don't understand what's causing these feelings and you keep thinking that it's something external, you'll stay stuck in this continuous cycle of experiencing these feelings over and over and over again. So you can actually eliminate these. So the Buddha shared the Four Noble Truths as his first teaching. And these 5 students were able to independently verify what he had to say by looking at their own situation. And they could see, yes, their mind is craving permanence. You can see it if you look at your own life objectively. You can see that every single time you've ever been angry or sad or frustrated, there was something you wanted, something you expected, and you didn't get it. And maybe at that time you were looking to blame other people. You might have been adamantly arguing with people, trying to convince them that what they were doing was wrong and they needed to change what they were doing in order for you to be happy. But that's just the mind trying to get its cravings fulfilled permanently. And you can't experience that because you live in an impermanent world. So you're never going to be in a situation where you always get what you want. So if you can only be happy when you get what you want, the amount of time that you can be happy becomes less and less and less and less. The more wants, the more expectations you have, the less happiness that you can experience because you're only experiencing conditional happiness. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you've eliminated these cravings, desires, attachments, and now you can experience the unconditioned mental qualities of peace and joy that are permanent. They're going to be permanent in your mind where you're just always joyful, you're always peaceful, you're always happy because it's now unconditioned. It's not based on any condition. So it comes through training of the mind. So the Buddha gets to enlightenment at the age of 35 because he spends 6 years from the age of 29 to 35 to get to enlightenment. And then he starts teaching at the age of 35. And now he continues to teach all the way until the age of 80. He teaches for 45 years and countless people get to enlightenment during his lifetime because he has deep and profound wisdom to be able to help people get to enlightenment. And then he ultimately dies at the age of 80 and they preserve his teachings so that other people could get to enlightenment after his death. And these are the 3 criteria of what make a Buddha, is that they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. Then they dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people. And then there's countless people who get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So now looking at this situation, we can see that Siddhartha Gotama was definitely a Buddha because he meets all 3 of these criteria. And there's other criteria as well, but these are the main primary criteria. So he ends up dying at the age of 80, and now more and more people are still getting to enlightenment after his death. So ultimately, what he discovers is that this sickness, aging, and death, the reason why people are so disgruntled during this period of time is that the mind has craving for permanence. If you're sick and you're annoyed and frustrated by this is because the mind's craving permanent health. It's wanting this body to be permanently healthy when this isn't possible. Everything around you is constantly changing. It is impermanent. So as long as your mind is craving this body to be permanently healthy, when you experience sickness, you'll be disgruntled or angry or frustrated. And then the same thing with aging. If you're craving permanent youthfulness, where you want to be youthful, when you experience this impermanence of the body and it's changing and it's becoming older, your mind will be disgruntled and irritated and annoyed. And then the same thing with death, either your death or the death of the people around you. If your mind's craving permanence as you're nearing death or other people are nearing death or people around you are dying, you'll be sad and you'll be frustrated. It's not the love that's causing the sadness or the grief or the despair when someone's dying. It's the mind holding on and wanting this individual to be permanent. And all these beings around you, including you, are impermanent. We're all going to die. Every single one of us are going to die. But if your mind is craving permanence and you're holding on to this world, when you're getting close to death, you will struggle, and that'll be a very painful death for you. Or if you notice the people around you and you're grieving and sad during their death, this is not because you're a bad person or you've done anything wrong or anything like that. It's just that the mind is untrained, it lacks wisdom, and it's holding on to this person, wanting them to be permanent, when in reality they are impermanent. And you can look at various situations in your life and see that this is true. So the Buddha figures out why the mind is discontent. And he figures out why we keep experiencing this over and over, that because we're born, we experience sickness, aging, and death, and discontentedness. And he figures out that when you train your mind and you cultivate wisdom, you can eliminate the discontentedness where you're completely peaceful and joyful, and you can eliminate this constant round of rebirth where you're being reborn over and over and over again. And this is something that you can independently verify as well, the cycle of rebirth. You might not have the wisdom of how to do that right now, but as you learn and you practice and you understand the teachings more, you can independently verify that there's this constant cycle of rebirth where beings are being reborn over and over and over again. So if you eliminate the causes and conditions that are producing discontentedness, your mind will be becoming more and more peaceful and joyful in this life. And it's those same causes and conditions that are producing birth, which is leading to sickness, aging, and death. So when you eliminate craving, desire, attachment, you're eliminating the causes and conditions that are producing the anger and the sadness and the frustration and all these other discontent feelings. And by the time your mind gets to enlightenment, where it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you're not experiencing any discontentedness whatsoever, you'll know that you've eliminated the causes and conditions that are producing discontentedness. But if you've studied the cycle of rebirth, you'll also know that you're not going to be reborn in the world over and over and over again, continuing to experience the sickness, aging, and death and discontentedness. Because you might notice in your life, you're experiencing similar things happening over and over and over again until you cultivate wisdom. And once you cultivate wisdom and you make better decisions, you experience improved results in your life. So this is the life story of the Buddha, and I share it with you because there's certain aspects of it that can help you in your journey and your journey to enlightenment. The teachings of the Buddha aren't about everybody doing exactly what the Buddha did. You don't need to go off and ordain in order to get to enlightenment. You could, but you don't have to. You don't have to walk away from your family, which the Buddha did for a period of time, but ultimately he came back to his family where his wife and his son and his stepmother and other people from the family started ordaining with him, and they start training their minds. So he did come back and help his family. You don't need to do these kinds of things, but you do need to train the mind to let these things go. But training the mind to let something go is not the same thing as giving up something and you no longer have it. So you can have a computer and a mobile phone and a life partner and children. You can have these kinds of things and still get to enlightenment. You just need to learn how to train your mind to let it go so you're not holding on to it tightly. So what I'm going to do here is just open up to any and all questions that you guys have. Typically, as I'm teaching, I will stop at different times and open up to questions. But with the life story of the Buddha, I usually just teach it all the way through so you guys can learn the entire life story and then open up to questions that you guys might have. If you guys have questions about the Buddha's life story or any aspect of the path to enlightenment or anything you're seeing about Buddhism, you can ask any and all questions that you like. As I mentioned here, you can use the microphones. And then for those of you guys online, you can put this into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand in Zoom if you like and unmute your microphone and we'll be able to hear you. So does anybody have any questions here at the temple or anybody online? Helen, do you have a question?
Thank you, David. So how do we know about this story?
His life story is in the Pali Canon, and if you look at the Pali Canon, it documents his life story. And then, of course, there's various hearsay and things like this based on the life story of the Buddha, but the vast majority of what I just shared with you is all in the Pali Canon. There's a couple of things that I kind of share based on what I know about his life. Like you won't see that they say 108 advisors. They say like 100, or they say advisors, right? Or you won't see certain things like this, but the probably 99% of what I just shared with you is all from the Pali Canon. But there's a couple little things like that that I just know of and that other people know of, and I share that with you.
Okay. And when exactly did Gotama change into the Buddha?
At the age of 35, when he got to enlightenment, that's when he's considered to now be a Buddha, because he got to enlightenment by himself. But he also needs to meet these other criteria for us to really know that he's a Buddha, which is dedicate the rest of his life helping countless people get to enlightenment and then preserving his teachings. Once those three criteria are met, then more people would consider that person to be a Buddha. But there's people that will know, like, okay, this person having gotten to enlightenment by themselves and now seeing their trajectory that they're on in order to be able to help countless people get to enlightenment, preserve their teachings. They know even during this person's lifetime, this person's a Buddha. But for some people, they might not consider that person a Buddha until they meet all of these criteria, which actually happens at death. So this is why Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, oftentimes referred to himself as the Tathagata. He very rarely referred to himself as the Buddha, even though other people refer to him as the Buddha, and he once in a while did refer to himself as a Buddha. He would often refer to himself as the Tathagata, the one who's discovered the truth, or the one who shares the truth. And that's the way that he would refer to himself.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, that idea of his teachers that one needs to harm the body in order to get to enlightenment, what's the origin of that idea?
You know, that idea has been around for many years. It's even around today, that if you go to some meditation retreats and you're in a meditation position and you feel pain, they will say, just breathe through the pain, right? But the Buddha already taught us that this isn't going to lead to enlightenment. The pain is there for a reason. It's telling you that, hey, there's something wrong with your hip and you should make some changes here. That's a way for your body to send a signal to the mind, and now the mind will make a decision to shift or adjust. And this is why the Buddha shared 4 different meditation positions, because you can't permanently be in the same meditation position. And not every student can take the same meditation position. So you can be in some environments, even today, where maybe a teacher is trying to get all their students to sit in exactly the same position. And this shows a lack of understanding of the universal truth of impermanence, the very first teaching of the Buddha. So if you're in an environment like that, then you know that this teacher hasn't gotten to enlightenment. They don't understand these universal truths, and it would be unwise to study and learn with this individual, because you're not going to be able to learn what it takes to get to enlightenment. And so these teachings have been around where people have been disparaging the body for a long time. It's even around now. And this is one of the reasons why the story of the Buddha is actually so helpful for you, that you can learn from his life story that disparaging the physical body doesn't lead to enlightenment. So if you're ever in a situation where you're experiencing pain and somebody says, oh, just breathe through the pain, don't just ignore that, or, accept the pain, look at the pain, observe the pain, or whatever people might say, you can know that the Buddha didn't do that, so why would you? That's not what leads to enlightenment. So these kinds of things you can glean to understand what it takes to be able to get to enlightenment. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions here or online that you guys have? Looks like Rex has a question. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions on YouTube or Facebook.
Thank you, David. I think it's just pretty amazing that what the Buddha accomplished after basically living as a spoiled brat for 29 years, to actually obtain enlightenment despite where he came from. That's just, I find, amazing. He lived in a pleasure palace. He was a king. He was doted on. He never did a day of work. Everything was given to him. Zero responsibility. But then 6 years later, he's able to achieve enlightenment. I think most people have a better opportunity to obtain enlightenment today, because very few people have been, spoiled so totally as the Buddha was in his first 26 years. Just a comment.
Okay. Would you like me to respond to that?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I didn't share those things that you shared about the Buddha being a spoiled brat. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that he had no responsibilities and these kinds of things, but I understand that's what you're sharing. But just understand that's not what I shared. The thing that I would share based on what you were just sharing is that oftentimes you need to be able to do those things that Siddhartha Gautama did to realize that they don't lead to a peaceful life in order to be motivated to go out and experience a peaceful life. So if you've been rich and wealthy and had this life of luxury, if you've been taught that that's what it takes to lead to happiness, sometimes going off and doing that and experiencing that and realizing the truth that that's not what leads to happiness, now an individual can be motivated to go off and do something better in order to actually experience enlightenment. So I can see that that's potentially what Siddhartha Gautama experienced here, is that by living this life of luxury where he had a lot of things available to him, he realized that his mind was still disgruntled or still frustrated or still agitated, and that didn't lead to enlightenment. So then his mind, yes, it swung all the way to the other side. And this is typical of the unenlightened mind, that when it's letting go of something, it will tend to swing all the way to the other side like a pendulum. And now when you're over there, you realize that that doesn't lead to peacefulness and joy either. And now what the Buddha ultimately figured out is the middle way. And now when he figured that out and he started practicing that more and more, realizing that these two extremes don't lead to peacefulness, now he was able to figure it out. And a Buddha, or a person who's going to become a Buddha, has a certain quality in their mind that the average person doesn't have, which allows them to be able to do this, is that they have a profound memory, an unlimited memory, where the average person will have a limited memory. This is why you have limited memories of your childhood, is that your memory has a certain capacity, kind of like a hard drive. And if you have this limited capacity, as you're experiencing new things in life, you need to delete old files in order to store new files. And this is why you only maybe remember in detail maybe the last few years or the last 5 years of your life. And when you look back to your past, you just have some spotty memories because you've had to delete old files to store new files. But the individual who's going to become a Buddha, even in the unenlightened state, they have a deep, profound memory where they can remember countless details about their current life and their past lives too. So he was able to bring forth all that wisdom in order to be able to now figure out this middle way and now be able to get to enlightenment.
Like you said, two extremes. You know, the one, the complete idle life of luxury, and then the life as an ascetic. He experienced them both. What do you think about the fact, or what do you think about the fact that his son was named Rahula?
Rahula. So the name Rahula, it means fetter. And what a fetter is like a shackle and a chain and a ball that keeps you trapped in a certain area. And this is what people did during his lifetime, that if there was prisoners, they would put a shackle and a chain and a ball around your ankle, and this would keep you confined to a certain area. And the Buddha ultimately described these 10 pollutions in your mind as fetters, because that's what's keeping you trapped in the unenlightened state. So Siddhartha Gautama, being unenlightened and having this child, at that time, he probably saw his child as a fetter. But later, when he got to enlightenment, he realized that, no, this isn't a fetter. That's not one of the fetters. So he had named his child this during the time where he lacked wisdom and he didn't understand the true path to enlightenment. But later on, once he understood, now he describes what are the fetters. And Rahula is not one of the fetters.
No, he's not one of the fetters, but the fact that he was named a fetter makes me suspect that he couldn't accept any responsibility. In fact, he ran away. He ran away from his family. He ran away from the potential of becoming the king. I think he was under a lot of pressure. You know, his father wanted him to take over the kingdom. He's got a wife who has a baby, and he actually runs away before the baby's even named. In other words, he just can't take it. He's a little rich boy, a spoiled brat, and he runs away. And he's fortunate then that he becomes an ascetic and he obtains enlightenment. But I think that it's amazing that he obtained enlightenment, because I think he was just running away from his responsibilities.
Yeah, I wouldn't describe it that way. That's a perspective that some people choose to take. In my opinion, that's a pessimistic, judgmental perspective of judging somebody and looking at someone else's life in a judgmental way, which I wouldn't do. Instead, the way that I think about it is that he was so motivated to be able to experience and understand what enlightenment is so that he could experience this for himself and then share it with others, that rather than having a selfish desire to hold on to this life of being a king, he chose to let that go and walk away from it, and now go off on this journey where he's now homeless and he's living a life of accepting donations from other people. And now he's just living off of the basic necessities that he needed, that by the time he was an ascetic, he wasn't even accepting gold or silver or land or any kind of monetary wealth. He didn't abandon his family. He didn't run away from it. He didn't have this pressure that you're talking about. This is all your perspective, but none of that is documented in the Pali Canon at all. This is your own judgment of what his life might have been like based on your own perceptions. But the way that I see it and understand it is that this individual was interested in helping the kingdom. He was interested in helping people escape the misery, and he couldn't do that when he was living side by side with his family. He needed to step away in order to train his mind and be able to produce better and better quality mind. It's kind of like if there was a parent nowadays that was maybe interested in getting a PhD, or if they were interested in being an astronaut and they went away, or maybe they went in the military and they went away from their family to go do these things, they might be praised for that. Well, Siddhartha Gautama, realizing that the kingdom was in despair and having all this grief and misery, he was interested in helping them. And he realized that he couldn't do that by living side by side with his family, and he needed to step away for a period of time. He left his family in the royal palace, right? If I left you in a royal palace, you'd probably be very appreciative of that, but some people like to look at the Buddha and his life and push him down and degrade him and disparage him. And sometimes this is coming from one's own ego. If someone has ego, they're going to be very judgmental of another person, and they're going to look down on this person. And sometimes by looking down on a person and degrading him and disparaging them, someone might think it helps them to look better. But in reality, it's just what's going on in one's own mind, that we don't need to look at other people putting our expectations on another person about what this person should or shouldn't be doing in your life. Maybe someone looks at Siddhartha Gautama's life and say, oh, he did this wrong, or he did that wrong, or he shouldn't have did this, or he shouldn't have did that, or judge him in one way or another. But what I would encourage people to do is not to put your expectations on other people, not to judge other people for what they're choosing to do in their life, because you're not in their life and you don't have the full insight of what they're experiencing and what's involved in their decision making. That Siddhartha Gautama did one of the most amazing things that could ever be experienced, which is he gave up his royal heritage in order to go into this life of homelessness and discover what it takes for all of us, for all of humanity, to be able to get to this enlightened mental state. And even if just one person gets to enlightenment based on his teachings, that's the very best thing for that person ever, because they now no longer need to experience anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings. But since the life of Gotama Buddha, countless people have gotten to enlightenment. And this has been something very wonderful and magnificent for the world. And I don't judge him for choosing to step away from his family. I've stepped away from my family at different times. There were times when, with my wife and my son, I needed to step away and I needed to spend time away from my family. Even now, my wife is away. She's in America. She's there for 2 months, and she's going to be doing that now, she says, for twice a year. She's going to be gone for 4 months, and that's what she needs to do. And somebody might look at that and say, oh, how dare you leave your husband in Thailand? You're Thai and you should take care of your husband and you shouldn't go away to America. But they're not in her life, and they're not making the same decisions that she's making, and they're not understanding my life and my son's life. So when we start judging other people for what they choose to do or what they choose not to do, it just comes from our own ego. And what the Buddha is teaching you to do is eliminate that ego and not be judgmental towards others and not put your expectations on others. And this is going to help you to be able to get to more peacefulness and more joy and have better relationships with the people around you.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I just want to make one point. I'm not disparaging the Buddha in any way. I'm simply saying what happened with his life before compared to his life after and his enlightenment and all that he has done for mankind. I think it's just amazing. But in no way do I want that to be interpreted as disparaging towards the Buddha.
I'm not interpreting your words. I'm just listening to what you're sharing.
Okay, I just want to make it clear in case someone has a misperception.
Let me finish. I'm just listening to what you're sharing. And oftentimes when there's pollution in the mind, which you would probably agree that that's the case because your mind is unenlightened, that the mind doesn't see what it's actually doing. That oftentimes the mind justifies its conduct or the way that it talks or the way that it interacts in the world, not being able to see true reality. The things that you've shared, in my opinion, is disparaging and degrading and judgmental of another person. You're shaking your head no, you disagree. So we can disagree. We're not going to agree. But I would never talk about anybody in the way that you just described. That would be very unwise. This would be slander. This would be gossip. This would be disparaging another person. This is the ego, the conceit, looking at another person, judging somebody. Whether you choose to do that or not, that's your decision. I don't do those things. I choose not to do those things. I might have done those things long in the past, but through training the mind, through the teachings of the Buddha, I realize that it's unwise to talk about people in that way. But whether you choose to do that or not, it's your choice.
I think everybody judges.
Only someone who has ego and conceit would judge, not everybody. Because if everybody judged, this would be permanence. And we understand the universal truth of impermanence, that it's not possible for everyone in the world to be one particular way. So not everybody judges others. Is that all?
That's it.
Okay. So in the future, Rex, if you have questions or something like that, you would like to ask questions, feel free to ask all the questions you like. When someone's making statements and they're kind of expressing how they think about a certain thing, be sure there's questions in there because that's what's going to help you. When you just kind of talk about the things that you want to talk about, this isn't going to help you. But if you ask questions, this will really help you to be able to learn and grow and develop. Okay? Okay.
I think everybody judges, David. And I would say that I've even heard yourself.
What's that?
I've even heard yourself make judgmental comments. So I think you mean well, but I have heard you make judgmental comments.
Okay, well, maybe you can come talk to me privately and I will help you see that whatever your mind's perceiving as judgment, that it's not judgment. You won't see me judge anybody. And this is the kind of conversation that you typically have in class. And I'm not interested in this kind of relationship with somebody. I'm not interested in someone who is just interested in talking about their own things and sharing things the way that you're sharing. If you would like to talk with me privately, Rex, you can talk anytime and I'll be able to help you to see what's happening with your mind. But as long as you're having this kind of relationship, it's not going to help you and it's not helping the other students who are interested to learn. This isn't the first time that this has happened. This is probably the 8th or 10th time that you've done these kinds of things. And as you see, it's not helping you. It's not helping you to learn and grow and develop and make your mind move to this enlightened mental state where you can experience peace and joy. So I see you getting ready to pick up the mic again, but I'm not interested in having any further conversation in the public like this. If you would like to come talk privately, which is what I'd advise you to do, this is a better way for you to handle these kinds of challenges.
We will talk privately.
Okay, sounds good. Is there anybody else that has a question that they would like to ask in order to help them on their journey to enlightenment? Looks like Shay has a question.
David. So in the difficult human existence of sickness, aging, and death, because of craving and because of discontentedness, we don't get enlightenment, and so there is a rebirth. Does the Buddha say anything about the period in between the death and the rebirth?
He mentions this a little bit, but he doesn't really go into elaborate details about it, because what's happening during that time frame, it doesn't help you to eliminate discontentedness, because what you're doing is you're understanding these 10 fetters that we talked about in last week's retreat. And as you're learning those and you're training your mind to eliminate those, that's what's going to produce enlightenment for you. So while he does mention it, I've seen it at least in one of his teachings, he doesn't go into elaborate details about it. But there is this period of time, and it can be quite long. It can be quite long. I've seen as long as 2,000 years between existences, 500, even 2,000 years between existences. So there's something going on there, but exactly what that is, we don't necessarily know. And even if we did know, it's not going to help us to eliminate the pollutions of our mind to be able to get to the peace and joy of the enlightened mental state.
Okay. And does he say anything about the circumstances of the next rebirth?
Yeah, we do know that whatever you're doing in this life in terms of the quality of your mind, that's what's going to determine your next rebirth, which realm you're in, and the quality of the existence in that existence. So we refer to this as Gama or karma. This is the cause and effect, or the action and result, the results of your decisions. But it's not like there's a being who's judging you and trying to decide what you should or shouldn't be doing. There isn't a being who's judging you and determining whether you go to a good place or a bad place or anything like this. It's just a sequence of events. It's cause and effect. So if your mind has certain pollution in the mind at the time of death, this pollution is going to lead to a rebirth. And now that rebirth, depending on the condition of your mind, is going to determine which realm and in what condition you are within that realm. And this is what we refer to as Gama or karma, because it's cause and effect, or action and result. And the more you learn about these pollutions and the more you eradicate them from the mind, you see the peace and the joy coming into the mind more and more clearly. And now you know that you're actually making your way to this enlightened mental state, because you see the peace and joy in the mind starting to come through. And now, as you fully get to enlightenment, where it's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and there's no discontentedness, this is where you know that the mind is actually enlightened. And now, not only have you gotten to enlightenment, but you know that you've not only eliminated the causes and conditions that produce discontentedness, but you've removed the causes and conditions that are producing rebirth as well. So you'll know that you're not going to experience another rebirth from that point forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I had some Vitamilk this morning, so my voice is a little scratchy. I need some water. Are there any other questions that you guys have here at the temple or online? Some questions?
Is it possible that there have been some people who got to enlightenment by themselves but didn't choose to teach later?
The Buddha does talk about this in his teachings. It's referred to, the way that I think it's pronounced, as Pakya Buddha. And what this is this an individual who does get to enlightenment by themselves, but they don't teach and they don't share their teachings. And this is someone who is referred to as a Pakya Buddha, or I think that's how it's pronounced. You can see it in the discourses. I've never met anybody like that, so I don't know that this exists, but it must have existed, or else the Buddha wouldn't have taught it or discussed it. So it must have existed during his lifetime, and he must have known about it, or else he wouldn't have described it during his lifetime. But I've never met somebody like that today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do is just end class here by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you so much for choosing today to learn and understand the teachings of the Buddha. Anytime you guys would like to understand the teachings, you're more than welcome to come learn and grow and develop. I'm pleased to help you with any questions that you guys might have, or you're interested in understanding what the Buddha taught and how you train your mind and move to this enlightened mental state. These Sunday classes are ideal for someone who's just starting out, and I teach here at the temple, and I also teach from home. So at 9 a.m. in the morning, I teach here. At 9 p.m., I teach from home, and I live stream all these classes. So you can attend live, or you can even watch the replay on our YouTube channel or on our podcast or in our Facebook group. There's lots of opportunity for you to be able to learn and grow and develop, and even receive personal guidance if you like. the best place to start is in the first book. There's this 13 book series. The very first book is the best place to start. You can just gradually start learning from there. And you can download this book for free. As I mentioned, you can take it and go print it. You can get printed copies here at the temple by reimbursing us for the printing cost, or you can order them on Amazon. So if you'd like help to learn how to eliminate these discontent feelings and get to the point where you have nothing but peace and joy in your life, the Buddha's teachings are here to be able to help you do that. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for your questions and your interest to learn, and perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Sawadee krap. Sawadee krap.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.